now that it's like dark so early, the light is real funky. um, Let me just make sure this is streaming correctly for a second. And it is great. Um, we'll say that this light is my superhero mask for right now. um, I just really wanted to do a quick one today because I did one on Monday about cults, Trump, and toxic relationships. And so it really made me reflect a little bit on my past relationships and what a toxic relationship, what that was for me. And I think that I tend to not love the word toxic because it's a little bit black and white thinking. I think that no one stays in a relationship that's like purely all bad unless maybe you're being held captive. And so I do tend to hesitate to use the word toxic, actually. And it can be very stigmatizing against having healthy and mature conversations about our needs and wants in a relationship. Especially, I hate it when we refer to human beings as toxic because it can be very dehumanizing. However, it can be helpful, especially when people are having trouble setting really clear boundaries and like maybe like leaving a relationship that's not healthy, especially when it's in like really severe ways, like when the relationship is physically violent, or even just like very emotionally manipulative. Then it can be really nice to realize that what you're in is a toxic relationship and to get out as soon as possible. And so I kind of want to share a story about that did happen for me in hopes that we can speak more clearly about what's maybe healthy. I really, again, it's not black and white, it's really a spectrum. What are the healthy qualities? What are the unhealthy qualities? And oh, I'm like, God, what was that noise? Is my heater turning on? It's like, it's an old heater and it just like, so again, my goal in doing these mental health check-ins always is to help end the stigma against talking about just sort of basic mental health issues. So that's why I want to share this experience with you today. So in 2010, I was living abroad in the Netherlands, and I was in a relationship, and it was unhealthy in a number of ways. And I think that in a lot of ways, I really had put myself in a situation with this person a lot more than I would have because I had some financial insecurity. So I was working as an au pair, a live-in nanny, and my salary was very small. And he offered me a lot of things, like sort of like, oh, let's go on a trip, let's do this, let's do that, that were very appealing, that maybe it's kind of tough to say. I feel that I would have done them anyway. So I don't know if it's completely fair. So maybe it was more than just the financial instability, but some sort of, well, I know this is like a big philosophical question. Like, why do any of us choose a relationship to begin with? I think that because I was so far away from home, that it felt nice to have something to fall back on and to feel safe being far away. And people that I know and trust will, or for anyone, is really tough. That's a tough change to make. And that's a lot of discomfort. And that's a lot of discomfort when it comes to the very basic human need of belonging and trust and having close relationships. So I think that definitely contributed to my continuing to stay with him. There were a lot of warning signs, very, very upfront, as to why this was not a great relationship. And so I want to outline what those were, and then I'll share with you the number one thing that helped me exit this relationship pretty quickly. And so I noticed that he was very emotionally volatile. So I did not feel emotionally safe. It seemed like there were a lot of things that no matter what I said or did, he could have a very strong emotional reaction to that was like very insecure. Like, oh, I saw that you were texting someone. Are you cheating on me? That kind of thing, where that's not the kind of relationship that I'm used to. And it's not the kind of relationship that I want to have, that's like stable and trusting. So there was a lot of insecurity that I was like gonna, like irrational insecurity that I was gonna cheat on him because that's not something that I do in relationships. And it's not something that I demonstrated that there was maybe that I either had a propensity to do and I wasn't like doing actions, like it wasn't warranted. The distrust wasn't warranted. And then there was also some physical boundary violations. So there was this one day I can remember, and I was 25, I think. Yeah, 10 years ago. 25. I think I just turned 26 actually. And he got home from work and I was staying with him over a weekend, and he picked me up and started tickling me, which is already something that I hate, and really wouldn't stop, and I couldn't breathe. And I just couldn't like hold on to him anymore. He had picked me up and he wouldn't stop. And so I let go because I lost strength, and I fell backwards and actually hit my head on a concrete floor. So we're not just talking about like when someone is violating your boundaries, even if it's mostly emotional, it can be actually life-threatening in other ways that are related to emotional boundary violations. But in this case, this was a real physical boundary violation. I had asked for this person to stop, and they did not hear me. They didn't care to hear me. And the result was that I had a pretty significant, probably a concussion, although I did not get medical help. I probably should have. So to me, it kind of demonstrated like a slippery slope. Someone that very emotionally volatile would react very, very, very strongly to things that I couldn't predict. I didn't know what I was going to say that would set him off. And it was now sliding into physical boundary violations as well. So I started to get much more worried about this relationship. And so on Monday, I talked about like what is it that cults do and what is it that Trump does that can be very toxic. And I talked about gaslighting and denying your experience. I would say that the main toxic thing for this particular is the inability to communicate clearly each other's wants and needs from both sides. I would say that it was the physical and emotional boundary violations. I would say that it was the extreme insecurity, the accusations, distrust. So these are a whole bunch of other factors that would put it in the toxic category. And I posted this meme of this couple, and they're laying in bed, and the woman says to the man, "What do you want to fight about today?" As they're sort of. And so I think for a lot of us that, especially if we grew up in dysfunctional homes, that we might normalize like fighting and disagreements. And, oftentimes these things get normalized, but then when you get into a healthy relationship and healthy communication strategies whereby you don't have to continuously project, get angry, get frustrated, pick a fight, be passive aggressive. There's all these healthy ways to do all that, healthy communicating. Most of them have to do with sharing how we're feeling and saying, "Hey, I felt embarrassed when this happened. Could we talk about it?" Or, "Hey, I felt really disappointed that you didn't do that thing that you said that you do, because I have a need to feel like I can trust my partner and that your word means something to you." So there's healthier ways than just picking fights or being passive aggressive that I definitely did not know. No idea that I could have that kind of relationship. Was working on it. And so this is what I mean when I say I had a toxic relationship I got out of. And now I want to share the number one thing out of it so quickly. So I've been working on the production team of these Cracked Up events. Yesterday there was one, and Daryl Hammond from Saturday Night Live, who's the subject of the movie Cracked Up, shared that he's like, "I don't have any secrets on how to get better," because he has struggled with mental. He said, "But the number one thing is ask for help. That's all I do. I ask for help. I ask for help." And so maybe that I would say that this is the top two things that helped me get out of this toxic relationship very quickly. The first one was asking for helps. And then the second one is the response that I got. Okay. So I called my mom, and I realized that can be a privilege to have a healthy mother that I can talk to and trust. And I feel very grateful that I have that. And I called my mom and I said, I don't know about this relationship. It's kind of freaking me out. Like this is happening. And this was only a few months into the relationship. And she just listened. She didn't judge me, even though it was pretty chaotic. And she said, and she emailed me the Wikipedia entry for borderline personality disorder. And I read through it, and I decided that the person that I was seeing, that I was in a relationship with, had met like almost every single criteria for borderline personality disorder. And so I wanted to number one thing that got me out of that relationship was that I realized that he fit every single one of those. I was able to mentally detangle myself from this attachment. Because once we're emotionally attached to someone, it's like our brain, because our brain is wired perpetuate the human race and want to procreate. As soon as we like someone and they like us back, it's just like, it's going to take so much to pull you apart, even if it's kind of toxic. And so my brain definitely wanted to still be attached and wanted to still be in love and wanted to still be with this person. But as soon as I read that list and I realized that this was a real mental illness and his behavior was falling into a real set of patterns, I couldn't be under the false pretenses anymore that somehow we were in some sort of special predicament or that somehow it could get resolved, especially because the science is very clear that with borderline personality disorder, very, very intensive therapy is needed, typically dialectical behavioral therapy at least twice a week. That's some of the science that I've read behind it. And it was like, okay, this isn't going to get cured like on my timeline, and I want something more than this. So pretty immediately after reading that list, I broke up and actually just decided to come back and move back to the United States. And so I want to say that the number one thing that helped me get out of that relationship with the toxic tendencies so quickly was that knowledge of mental illness. That was knowledge. My mom had been a volunteer for SLOW Hotline, which is a crisis hotline that people can call when they're suicidal or having a mental health crisis. So my mom had received training in all the different mental illnesses and how to respond to a crisis. So she was the exact right person to call. It's not right. What do you think is going on? And she had all of this knowledge about mental health. And it's something that I think that we don't do very well in our society, because as soon as I had the knowledge that I needed to see what was going on, I was able to get out. Whereas before, I wasn't really understanding. I didn't have the knowledge that I needed. And so I just wanted to bring that up because I think that it's very, very, very important work for us to do to get emotionally and mentally healthy and to be literate in mental and emotional health. It's like the number one thing that we can do to make sure that we are emotionally and physically safe. Because as I said, even though this relationship was primarily emotionally abusive, it was also kind of blending into being physically abusive. And so, I don't want for anyone to be in situations where our lives are being threatened or that we're in such a heightened state of stress that we then have chronic illnesses come up. Or, like a depressed immune system will get sick more often or make less healthy eating choices, right? And so it's really, really, really important for us to get our interpersonal relationships healthy. It's very important. I just think that oftentimes we are missing the knowledge that we need to create healthy relationships. So I just wanted to share that story with you all. And I hope that inspires you that, please do watch the YouTube videos on healthy or unhealthy relationships. Please do read the books about how to create healthy relationships or what the signs are. Please do read those books on what mental illness is. Go read the Wikipedia entries on mental illness. I love Gabor Mate. He has written some wonderful book. I could recommend a million books. So if you have any particular suggestions of books like on a specific topic that you would like to read, please send me a message and I'm happy to recommend those to you. But, I just think that our own ignorance, can be the one thing that holds us back. And luckily I had a mom who had all this wealth of knowledge that she was just like, oh, here's what's going on. here you go. And I was like, and once that light bulb went off, I was like, oh, I don't have to stay in this. This is what's happening. This is the long-term trajectory of this person. This is obviously, I'm not a psychiatrist myself. I can't just go around diagnosing people, but it's very important for us to be literate in what the symptoms of mental illness are so that we can spot them. And, we can start being honest. For example, this person, I had asked him to go to therapy, but he was just going to talk therapy like once a week. Well, guess what? Talk therapy isn't a cure for borderline personality disorder. This is a very severe mental illness. And the only, clinically effective treatment for borderline so far based on the research is, very intensive dialectical behavioral therapy. It's on us to be what mental illnesses are and what the treatments are so that we can start having the actual conversations that we need to have and to set the boundaries that we need to have and to have the relationships that we need to have. You might be fighting with your partner all the time and not realizing that maybe your partner suffers from clinical depression. And guess what? There's treatment for that. Or your partner suffers from clinical anxiety. Guess what? There's help and treatment out there. So we need to be able to see things for what they really are so that we can be having the conversation really need. And I was helpful, and I'll see you again on Monday.